Hi folks, how you doing? Game 7 of the World Championship match between Carlsen and Anand is in the books. It was a certainly very long battle, 122 moves. And if you were there watching the game from the beginning to the very end, I think you deserve a mention, because I just came to see the final part of the game and I was sure it would have ended already. But nope, there was still a lot to be played, it seemed. So very exhausting game, just one of those that Magnus Carlsen loves. He tried definitely to squeeze the best out of Anand, and let us see what happened. Did he get some Anand juice finally there? He plays 1e4 again, and we have another Berlin. Yes sir, Anand is not afraid of trying the Ruy Lopez again. I mean, he lost in the second game. It started like an anti-Berlin, but his defeat wasn't due to the opening. I think he got a pretty decent position out of the opening, so I mean something he didn't get with that last Sicilian, so it was pretty normal. He went back to the Berlin, and this time Carlsen went for the main line for the end game. He didn't go for d3 for the anti-Berlin, and we have this infamous Berlin endgame move order, knight f8, and queens are exchanged. I'm sure lots of people around the world were praying God every day not to see this position in this match, but yes, finally we get this Berlin queenless middle game slash end game. Very complicated position, and very fashionable and trendy, since Kramnik used it in 2000 to dry Kasparov's possibilities of getting a victory with white pieces. And we have h3, one of the critical lines, one of the most famous, most trendy lines in any case. King e8, knight c3, h5. Okay, I have basically no idea about theory of the Berlin. There are so huge number of lines, possibilities of moves for both players, that I'll just say this looks logical and nothing else. It seems they were following for a long time a recent game between Anish Giri and Rajabov, but nothing else. I don't know anything else about the theory of this move. h5 looks normal because it kind of stops g4 or makes it a little bit more difficult, and opens the h file for the rook to come to h6 if he wills so. So bishop f4, bishop e7, developing moves, rook a d1, and bishop e6. And after knight g5, of course, I guess black isn't willing to take with the f pawn to e6, which would be rather weak. So that's why he plays rook a6 to protect the bishop on e6, and he would take with the bishop if white takes there. g3 was played here. Bishop takes g5, bishop takes g5. Black gives up his bishop pair, but in exchange he gets quite an active rook on g6. The bishop now is protected with h4. All this seems very forcing and concrete, so I'm sure the players looked at this very thoroughly during their preparation. f6 is played here, e takes, g takes, and the bishop must retreat, allowing black this knight takes h4 capture, winning a pawn, but he still hasn't moved the rook on a8, for instance, so black certainly seems to have some compensation. Knight f3, getting away from there with a check, maybe an idea by black here, so that's why this f3 move, I guess, is played. Rook to d8, king to f2, connecting the rooks, getting away from the pin. Now the knight is under attack here. Rooks were exchanged. Magnus takes with the knight. This knight is going to try to be rerouted to the center of the board, and the knight must depart, so knight f5 and rook h1. Now both players have one pawn ampri. Black takes the one on a2. This is I mean, Carlsen here takes on h5. It was mildly interesting to see that, trying to trap this bishop with the typical b3, then going something like knight c3. White is not in time, because black has the immediate bishop b1 attacking c2, and there is basically no way to defend that. Knight d3 makes no much sense, but just to illustrate, the knights would be exchanged and black takes on c2, and probably this is very drawish due to the opposite colored bishops. But anyway, bishop takes a2, rook takes on h5, bishop goes back to e6 and g4. Carlsen tries to get something going with this 2 against 1 in this king side, with his king, with the rook, everything trying to get regrouped around this 2 against 1. Knight to d6, rook h7, really getting some activity with this rook. I mean, this black king isn't in real danger because white doesn't have that many active pieces to attack it, but it certainly could be better placed. Knight f7 was played here. Another interesting moment here. One may wonder, as I did, why couldn't white take on c7, this pawn? Well, it seems black is getting lots of counter chances with his active or at least coordinated pieces here, and he doesn't have much problem after f5. G takes, bishop takes. Now he is attacking c2, and there are some potential of discovered attacks against the rook. So if knight e3, which is looking very normal, defending c2, attacking the bishop, black could very well simplify with rook g2 check, exchanging rooks. King takes, bishop takes h7, and black has no problems whatsoever. So after knight f7, Carlsen just plays knight to e3, doesn't bother to take on c7. Now king to d8, now it's defended, and knight to f5. c5, denying this knight to d4 square. I guess that's one of the main ideas there. Knight goes back to g3, always trying to reroute, to recycle the pieces. Now this knight will probably go to h5, putting some pressure against this at least theoretically weak f6 pawn. Knight to e5, and now rook h8 check, rook g8. Rook exchange would be a great relief for black, I guess. We have opposite colored bishops, and that should be quite throwish. But bishop took on e5, avoiding the opposite colored bishop endgame. F takes, now white has a knight against black's bishop, and rook back to h5, attacking black's pawn on e5. Bishop takes g4, very interesting moment in the game. Although the engines may say this is a mistake, do not be fooled by the machine. This is a very practical choice by Anand to draw these kind of endgames. He's depriving white from his connected passed pawns. He will basically to get 2 pawns for the bishop, and remember, knight and rook versus a rook is always a theoretical draw, so this is a very pragmatic and practical decision to hold this endgame. Otherwise white will be putting lots of pressure on this pawn. I mean, you probably can't defend it now, and white would have a couple of connected passed pawns here, which could be certainly dangerous, but this is very pragmatic and practical decision. F takes, rook takes, black takes 2 pawns for his piece, but only thing he has to do is try to exchange his 4 pawns, if you will, for white's 2 pawns, and that will be a theoretical end game. Of course, Carlsen will try to push this. He has the edge here, he has to try to win it, but the position is certainly not that critical as if black would allow this couple of connected passed pawns. Now of course rook can take on e6, on e5, b6, protecting c5, and this is a quite curious endgame. Black has lots of chances to hold this, I think. I mean, of course I would lose this dozen of times in 5 minutes, but practically speaking, this is very instructive to see how these GMs apply these interesting methods of simplifying into very drawy structures. And now we saw a very long sequence of moves in which Carlsen tries to make progresses, tries to improve his pieces, but he really doesn't succeed in doing it too much. He really wants to get into black's position and win pawns. He cannot allow himself to exchange his pawns, because that would be an automatic draw, at least it should be. But he tries to improve his pieces slowly. Now a check, and the king goes to b2, rook h6. I mean, black just has to wait with his rook, trying not to commit too much, not to weaken his pawns, and that's all. Keep a king, safe king, and rook up and down. trying to hold the position. He is not playing for victory, of course. Knight d1, rook g6, and so on. The knight tries to be recycled to a active position. Rook h2, check, king b7, king c3, rook h4. Black doesn't want to allow the king to go through to the center. King back to b2, rook h2. It's not easy to make progress, as Carlsen is showing us here. Knight is under attack, so it goes to f6, rook f2, king c3, and again rook f2, carrying the king. Knight e4, rook to h4, etc. We have a long series of moves here. King d2, check. This is an interesting situation. Black had a choice here, had to think about the rook exchange, and I'm not entirely sure, but I think exchanging rooks would lead to a very dangerous position for black. White certainly has chances to win here. The idea would be like something like b5, knight d3 attacking the pawn, king up, and a key move I think would be something like c4, trying to fix this c5 weak pawn, which cannot be defended anymore with other pawns. And eventually I think white could do something with it, forcing this king out of the zone, out of the defense of this pawn, maneuvering with the king, making black fall into some kind of zugzwang, and this could be certainly very dangerous for black. I think this should be somehow winning for white. So very wisely Anand keeps rooks on the board. He goes rook back to h4, c4 anyway, rook h3, and we have more moves. The knight now will like to follow very interesting route through c3 to d5, and if later white is on time to put the rook on e7 and attack with two pieces c7, well, that would be quite an achievement, of course. And black has to react already. He plays b5. He has to try to exchange. Even if he exchanges all his 4 pawns for white's 2 pawns, this is over. Knight c3, c6, very well defending both b5 and d5 squares. Knight e4 attacking c5, but it's still defended with the rook, which is under fire, of course, as well. Rook to h5, knight f6, rook to g5, check here. Black king is forced into the queen side, into a5, but it's not a big deal either. Rook e4, rook g2, check, king c1. Nothing much going on here. And another pawn is exchanged, only one pawn remaining for black, and his task is much easier, of course. Knight takes on c5, but now king b5, rook c2, and black is surely going to exchange the remaining pawn of white. He's going to take it either way, and then he won't care that much. Of course, he wants to exchange rooks here, he wouldn't mind at all. King check, knight check, king takes on b3, so it should be over. White has no more pawns, but either player could blunder here. Black would have to give up his 2 pawns and then blunder into that in that theoretical rook and knight against rook endgame. And if white wants to blunder, well, he would have to not to take both black pawns and allow some of them to create complications, like lose a piece to one of them. Now we saw a long series of moves, after which Carlsen succeeds in taking both black pawns. I will just show the moves very quickly, as these are a lot of moves, a bunch of long series of moves, and I'm not sure this would be very entertaining. Just quickly showing you how this went. He slowly advances his king, his knight, and sieges this c6 pawn. After this check, 104 moves, Carlsen finally takes the pawn, and this, should be draw between titled players, not very difficult to hold. Once again, I would lose this tons of times against anybody in the world, probably. But Carlsen kept pushing. Well, I just show how it went, because it may be somehow instructive. What black does is keep his rook away from his own king to avoid any kind of tactics like forks or skewers, and keeps the rook active to molest white king to give him checks whenever possible. So we see that's what Anand does. He of course doesn't want to go very far to the edge of the board with the king. Whenever possible he keeps the rook very active and checks white whenever possible. King back and forth, and finally after 121 moves Carlsen offered the draw by playing rook c1, and this is a draw, of course, no checkmate with a single knight on the board. So there it went, 122 moves, very long game, the longest so far in this match, and we had a draw. So Carlsen still leads by 1 full point this World Championship rematch in Sochi. Thanks for watching.